Hi there, Alyssa here from Beyond. In today's Insights educational session, we'll be looking into ways in which you can take action using your Insights dashboard and analyze your portfolio performance versus previous years. As you've learned in the very first session, the Insights dashboard is a pretty handy tool when it comes to looking at your overall portfolio performance and also looking at your performance versus the market. By default, we store up to 5 years worth of data. So if your listings are connected with Beyond for more than 5 years, that's good because you have more data in here that you could further analyze and understand where your listings are versus previous years. Let's dig into some stuff. So as you can see here on this portfolio, the revenue goal for this year is actually over 100%, which means we're actually beating our goal for the current year. The total revenue is pacing way ahead of the previous year. So overall, the portfolio is doing pretty good. With these key performance indicators, you could see how well your listings portfolio is pacing as it relates to the previous year. One big step apart from looking at these performance indicators is making sure that we're filtering down to whichever group of listings we're trying to dig in and see where we could take further actions or make changes as it relates to settings. You could make filters such as by base price, by health score, how the listings are booking up versus the market, by amenities, by the type of listing, as well as the size of listing. You could also look at a certain channel. So whether that is Airbnb versus booking.com, you could also view a listing group based on the market that you're digging into. You can also exclude certain listings. So if there's a particular listing that is no longer taking bookings for this year or should be excluded for whatever reason, you can exclude that data from your Insights dashboard. So for the purpose of this example, I'm going to look at those listings doing poorly or fairly as it relates to booking pace. I'm going to go ahead and toggle off those ones that are booking up pretty good and excellent and apply that filter. You'll notice here, once I've applied the filter, that there is a change in the revenue goal. So this is just accounting for those listings that currently have a poor or a fair health score. What is really interesting is that these listings make up for 55% of the revenue goal for the current year. So that basically tells me that these listings typically do well. However, they're just pretty much pacing a little slower on the tail end of the year. And you can also see that here in the charts that the listing just haven't received as much bookings as yet. This will continue to change over time. So another neat thing with the Insights dashboard is you do have access up to 5 years worth of data. So you could toggle on 2 years or 3 years once that data is uploaded into your dashboard. So if your listings have been connected to Beyond for 2 years or 3 years, you have access to that amount of data. You could see here that I'm able to see that this July, already these listings that fall into this group have already made $52,000 worth of revenue versus the previous year. So they're rocking and rolling, which is great. So not many changes to be made to further improve the portfolio as it relates to revenue. But maybe as we get further out of the year, we could look at other ways in which we can further increase bookings. At this time, I'm actually looking at our monthly performance. I could also toggle on performance by date, a specific date. I could also look into daily performance, and then I could also view performance as it relates to the day of the week that it starts tracking that performance. So I'm going to go ahead and look into a couple other charts here and see, what are some of the trends that we're seeing with this particular group. You will notice here that we don't actually have any cancellations showing up for the listings, but in the last 3 years, when when we had COVID, like for example, there was 11% worth of cancellations. So these charts really do tell a story and really do help you to materialize how you're doing versus those previous years, historical data. And it's really nice if you can be able to see what's happening as it relates to this year versus last year. So if this was on the flip side, let's say that if 4 years ago you had $103,000 worth of revenue by the booking date versus this year having $11,413 worth of revenue. At this point, you want to look into how is your base price, how is your booking pace, right? what can you do in terms of your pricing, as well as is there any amenities, any changes that was made to the listing that cause bookings to dip? So right here, you could look into those poor listings. So I'm going to actually go into apartment Manresa, see what exactly is happening. So while I'm looking at the calendar, I'm noticing that there are no bookings whatsoever. A neat thing you can do with the Insights dashboard as well is also filter by listings. You could dig into just one particular listing to understand how that listing performed in previous years versus the current year. So I'm going to go ahead and just look at that specific listing. So it's just going to be that listing that I'm looking at there. It's a poor health score. So just want to make sure that we are once I've basically filtered down to that specific listing, I can see for the current year that we've made $0 out of the entire revenue goal for the year for this listing. So this listing has not had any bookings for the entire year so far. So right here, we could see the last booking was on June 2023. I'm going to toggle on the last 2 years as well as the last 3 years and 4 years. And you could see that this listing has had a couple bookings here and there in the past 4 years. So probably performed bad. There's obviously some changes that was made to the listing that could have potentially caused it to lose out on bookings. Maybe the listing was closed down for this year. Maybe prices had increased by 25% and the market's prices has only increased by maybe 5%. So this is where you could look at, how has pacing slowed, how has pacing increased, and then track it back to what changes were made to the listing as it relates to the market. What's neat is you're able to take that and filter down as well. So you can compare the market. So you want to compare this listing to your particular market. And this is really neat because then now you're able to see exactly how other listings are doing. I'm going to go toggle off last year and then just focus on this year. So you could see here that basically similar size listings in this market actually are pacing pretty decent as related to this listing. So obviously there are changes that can be made to the settings to the pricing of this listing to help increase occupancy. So let's go back to that particular listing. Okay, so once I've come into this listing, I'm seeing here, let's see what changes were made. So you can see here the price changes that were made. So just yesterday, the base price of this listing had been decreased to 150 euros. But previously, back in May, the pricing was increased to 500 euros. You can see also in April that the listings was way over 400,000 euros. Woo! So definitely you could track that this listings base price had a few discrepancies that could have possibly prevented potential guests from booking the listing. Another thing that you could look into is your minimum stays. How are minimum stays pacing as it relates to your market? So just thinking about what is the typical minimum stay in Barcelona in this particular area. Like, is it a 5-night minimum stay during this week in July, or is it a 3-night minimum stay? And if it's a 3-night minimum stay for similar size listings in this market, we highly recommend decreasing your minimum stay to basically help increase bookings and open up opportunities for potential guests who are looking for shorter stay lengths. So going back to our Insights dashboard, another cool tool with the Insights dashboard is our Lens View. So you could toggle on Lens View and take a look at all of your listings in this particular group. I will go ahead and filter to our poor and fair health score listings so I can see the Lens View on that. So I've toggled on Lens View in order to dig into those particular listings with a poor or a fair health score. You could see a listing level, how revenue is doing versus the previous year, how it's pacing. You could also dig into the ADR and see exactly what happens. Is it that you've decreased the average daily rate? Have you increased it versus last year? This really just helps you to really dig into the nitty-gritties of what exactly or what changes exactly you need to make to increase the performance of each listing. Here's a case where pretty much the adjusted occupancy has decreased by 33% versus last year. So we're pacing behind last year. So at this point, you want to check into your ADRs, check into your base price, check into changes that were made to the listing. and see where you can make necessary changes to help boost and increase bookings. So that's all for this session on ways in which you could take action using your Insights dashboard. But there are more strategies and tips to come in the following video. Feel free to reach out to us at support@beyondpricing.com if you have any questions or need any assistance with navigating your Insights dashboard. Have a great day.